Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM's POTUS.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM for Thursday, November 14th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So Donald Trump threw a grenade into the Washington confirmation process late on Wednesday when he announced his pick for Attorney General. That would be none other than Matt Gaetz, the now former congressman from Florida. This came in the wake of his meeting on Capitol Hill with the Republican Congress and after a 2-hour meeting with now lame duck President Joe Biden. Safe to say the Gaetz announcement took Washington by surprise. Tom, what do you make of the pick, and what about the reaction from people in D.C.?
Well, it is a out-of-the-box pick.
I was wondering how you were going to describe this one.
It's wild. I mean, listen, but let me just say, okay, for all of the Democrats, members of the media who are talking about how, you know, Gaetz doesn't have the experience, he doesn't have this, he doesn't have that. It's kind of like, okay, really? Like, I got 2 words for you. Pete Buttigieg, okay? The guy had no experience, and he's the Secretary of Transportation, and at least Matt Gaetz is a lawyer and has a law degree. And, you know, I think he practiced law for like 2 years. It's not your traditional sort of standard resume for AG. But at the same time, I saw, you know, someone had said, and Carl, you can fact check this, that John F. Kennedy picked his 35-year-old brother who had never tried a case in federal court to be his attorney general. So this is not like crazy unprecedented. That being said, look, I think it is a signal, though. I mean, he had a lot of choices here, and he chose the most aggressive, sort of inflammatory road possible. And we can speculate as to the reasons why Trump might have gone in that direction. But there's no question that Matt Gaetz, he is a lightning rod, and there are a lot of people that are shocked and mystified and upset by this pick. And now the question is, can he get confirmed? I mean, can he make it through the process? And we'll have to see how that goes. I'm not sure he can, but we'll see.
I'm going to have Phil Wegmann on in a little bit. I want to talk to him deeply about the chances for confirmation. But Carl, was there no one else who could have done what the president wants done and not have sort of set off a firebomb on Capitol Hill?
Well, that's an interesting question. And Tom raises an interesting historical analogy with Robert F. Kennedy. But let me just back up for a minute. Until up and through Kennedy's pick of his brother as Attorney General, the Attorney General was always a member of the cabinet. There was no pretense that there was some wall that separated him and the way there is today. You know, Joe Biden said all of these things about Merrick Garland when he came in, that they wouldn't even take his phone calls, they wouldn't tell him what to do. It's sort of how this thing has evolved, but it's aconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that suggests that, and it's not even sustainable, because then who does the Attorney General report to? You know, I didn't vote for Merrick Garland. Nobody got a chance to vote for Merrick Garland. They voted for Joe Biden. And if the relationship between the White House and the Department of Justice had worked the way it had worked through most of our history, if career prosecutors would have brought this thing to Merrick Garland, we want to prosecute the former president. The Attorney General would have gone to the White House, and the president said, well, no, obviously we're not going to prosecute the previous president who now wants to run against me, because we don't do that kind of thing. And so the politics, this idea that politics is unethical, leads you to a funny place. And Robert F. Kennedy was known to be John F. Kennedy's closest confidant and his brother. And everybody understood when Robert F. Kennedy spoke, he was speaking for the White House. What Trump has done, and I don't know if Trump knows any of this history or not, but he's reverted to an earlier model that in some ways is much more sustainable as a constitutional proposition. The problem isn't that. The problem is Matt Gaetz is sort of the singularly unpopular person. Right. Robert F. Kennedy was not unpopular among Democrats. Matt Gaetz is not. The Democrats, their heads fly off the bodies at the mention of Matt Gaetz' name, but Republicans don't like him either.
Right.
And so what you've done is you've given a stink sandwich to John Thune on his first day on the job. And look, Susan Collins, I don't think he'll be confirmed. Lisa Murkowski said the same thing. It seems like a long shot for confirmation. But whether he's confirmed or not, it's clear what Trump wants to pick is, we'll say crony, but that's kind of a pejorative word. He wants to pick someone who will carry out his wishes, the Attorney General. I guess I'm arguing that there's some historical precedence for that.
Yeah, look, I texted our friend Richard Porter last night when I heard the announcement, because Richard was caught on tape at the RNC having this exchange with Matt Gaetz, right?
Right.
Kevin McCarthy was there on the floor, and Matt Gaetz came over. Kevin was in the middle of an interview with CNN, and Matt Gaetz came over, as Matt Gaetz is wont to do, and started yelling at McCarthy and like deriding him and interrupting his interview. And Porter turned to him and was like, "Don't be an asshole, okay?" And the guy was like, "I don't even know who you are." And he goes, I think he dropped an F-bomb in Matt Gaetz's face, since it doesn't matter who the F I am, just don't be an asshole, whatever. And so this exchange kind of went viral. And so, yeah, Porter is one of those people who was just shocked by the pick. And I think there are a lot of people like that. But to Carl's point, we'll have to see whether he gets through confirmation or not. But it does fall in line with some of Trump's other picks, in the sense that he is looking for people who are going to absolutely, like get into the DOJ, or Pete Hegseth get into the Pentagon and just absolutely, tear stuff apart. Yep. and root out some of the, folks who have been acting politically and doing all of these things, the deep state, if you will. And certainly Matt Gaetz fits in that mold, and he would absolutely do that. And I think that's why, at least, some people within the Department of Justice, from the things that I've read, are pretty nervous about his appointment. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about some strong women. Supposedly Donald Trump doesn't like strong women, but he has nominated Kristi Noem as Director of Homeland Security and Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Nikki Haley said right here on XM that she was approached by Steve Witkoff about joining the Trump cabinet and declined the offer. But Tom, what do you make of especially Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence? That I think that if we hadn't had the Matt Gaetz nomination, this would be getting more attention.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump had this unique mix of people that he had to kind of figure out where to put them all, right? And what to do with them and how to utilize them. I think the rumors were that Tulsi Gabbard wanted defense. She obviously didn't get defense, but she's in as DNI. I think it's a fine pick. I don't have a problem with it at all. I mean, I think she has a background that is suitable to that position. It's not like she's been in the military. But I do think, and it is ironic. I mean, I tweeted out an NBC News and I forwarded it to Carl this morning. NBC News, this is their headline. Trump's pick for top intel job has been accused of, quote, traitorous parroting of Russian propaganda. Remember, and this was by Republicans, but she also on the debate stage in 2016 was effectively, called a Russian asset by Hillary Clinton and sort of run out of the party. And she's been I feel like she's been mistreated by members of the media, members of the Democratic Party. And
Tom, they put her on a no-fly list.
They even put her on a no-fly list, which, as Carl points out, didn't get mentioned in this article, which is interesting. So, yeah, look, I have no problem with Tulsi Gabbard being in that position, and I hope that she does a good job and acquits herself well.
Well, she may not be confirmed either, Tom. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Andy, you think about this, though, with Tulsi Gabbard. The Bulwark had a headline today. Tulsi Gabbard, Russian asset or dupe. I mean, so this is the Democratic Party post-2016. They're red baiting. They're all little Joseph McCarthy's running around there accusing people of being Russian spies and Russian stooges. Tulsi Gabbard is the kind of person that you think the modern Democratic Party would champion. And they did for a long time. She's born in Samoa. She's the first, she volunteered for Iraq. She was in the Hawaiian National Guard. She was deployed to Iraq during wartime in a medical unit for a year. She then got out. She was later deployed to Kuwait. She's a military combat veteran. She's the first practicing Hindu in Congress. She surfs, and I don't mean online. Right. And she's kind of the whole package. But she dissented on Ukraine, and it seems to me you ought to be able to. I've been on this show. I've been
and on
out,
Syria and other issues, right?
I'm outspoken on this issue in a way I'm not usually on issue. I'm very pro-Ukraine. I am personally, but it seems to me you ought to be able to not share Carl Cannon's view without being called a Russian asset. And that's to me the thread that links Trump's idea of Matt Gaetz, his nomination of Matt Gaetz, and Tulsi Gabbard. The Democrats are saying, "Oh, they're trying to weaponize the Justice Department." Well, in Trump's mind, the Justice Department was already weaponized against him, and what he's saying, Trump, is that he's going to correct that. He's going to get it back to its historic thing of fighting crime and not being involved in politics. Tulsi Gabbard, these things that the deep state, I guess, I don't want to use that, the intelligence, whoever has done to Tulsi Gabbard, these things have been done to her. She wants to go in the CIA and clean that out. That's what Trump's idea is. And so all these people, the media's had these, people resign. I don't know that that's a good idea or a bad one, but it's what Trump wants to happen. That's not a bug it's the feature of Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. So you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And when we come back, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the House and the continued meltdown on the left about this results from this election. So don't go away. We'll be back right after this.
This is Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. Not bound by any left-right constructs.
Real Clear Politics. Open to a wide political spectrum.
This is POTUS on Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. And Tom, it is now officially official that the AP has called the House for the Republicans with 218 seats. It puts them over the top. There are 9 races still to be called. There's 1 in Alaska, 4 in California, 1 in Iowa, 1 in Maine, 1 in Ohio, and 1 in Oregon. This is going to be another slim majority, it looks like, with a few seats in limbo, especially if members leave for posts in the Trump administration. But what do you make of the AP's story, and why does it take so long to figure this stuff out?
Well, you can thank California for that mostly, because they take some forever to count votes, and they've had a lot of competitive House districts, House races over the last few cycles, and as you just said, I mean, 4 of them are still undecided, and they're still, California 13, they've only got 76% of the vote counted, so 3/4 of the vote counted, and we're, how many days after the election here? Like,
Tom,
9,
if this had been the one seat it depended on, we wouldn't know till Christmas.
Yeah, no, it's just ridiculous. So, look, this was, the AP is the sort of semi-official organ for declaring these things, even though other people had called this earlier. We had Republicans at 219 as of, I think, a couple of days ago. So,
well, they're one less now without Matt Gaetz, who we talked about.
Well, that's
before.
the other thing. Yeah, I mean,
he's already quit
resigned.
the House.
Exactly. So that kind of throws a wrench into things. But look, I mean, we have, I think, 6 races that are uncalled, and Republicans are leading in, I think, 3 of them.
Right. Half of them. Yeah.
So maybe they get to 222. Again, you get this Alaska district that is going to maybe go to ranked choice voting, and so there's still a little bit of mystery as to what the final number is going to be. But nevertheless, I mean, it's very clear that Republicans are going to have a tiny majority, and it's going to make things potentially difficult for them if they're not unified as a caucus in terms of getting stuff through the House.
Well, but one thing is they won't have Matt Gaetz anymore. So even if Mike Johnson only has 1 or 2 votes majority, he's probably safer than he would have been when Matt Gaetz went nuclear on Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, I was going to say that Mike Johnson's probably relieved that he doesn't have Matt Gaetz to deal with anymore. Yeah. But it does make that majority that much slimmer.
Right.
How worried are they that Trump is going to make things more difficult for them, Carl? They've got 2 years, and they'll be up for election again. And when you have this narrow a majority, you must have, well, I know, you have people who are in marginal districts who are saying, you know what, I need to be reelected. That means I need to tack a little bit towards the center. I've got to pick up some Democratic and independent votes. And if Trump makes it difficult for them to do that, they have to serve two masters here. Trump world, because they don't want to be primaried, but they also have to get reelected, which means they have to appeal to some non-Trump voters.
Well, you've said it perfectly, Andy. Very few of these members will be in districts that Trump didn't carry. But you're right. They don't want to be primaried by a Trumpier person, nor do they want to give an opening where they look so crazy that maybe a moderate Democrat could beat them. Look, I had to go to two dinners Wednesday night, two black tie dinners. Don't ask me why. It's a long story. One of them, I should say, our own Susan Crabtree won the second annual Dow Prize. It's a large award. She won it for the Secret Service stories that we've had her on to talk about. And I was proud of her, and I think we should give a shout out to her. The
Definitely.
other dinner,
but just before you go on, yes, that we should just pause for a moment. This is a big deal. She really deserves it. She's done great reporting, and we're very proud to have her on the show from time to time. I look forward to having her back, and congratulations. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other dinner was the Encounter Books thing. It's a conservative imprint. Roger Kimball heads it, and everybody there, as best I could tell, everyone in that room, and it was a huge cavernous ballroom, except me, was a Republican, and about half of them are traditional conservatives, and about half are Trumpy Republicans. But I didn't hear one person say anything. They were all astonished to the last man and woman about these picks. Not just Pete Hegseth. Some of them were appalled by that. Some of them Tulsi Gabbard. All of them by Matt Gaetz, and the feeling in the room was that Trump is really, he didn't just run because so he could get a pardon, or so he pardon himself or make Jack Smith's investigation go away. It's beginning to dawn on these people that he means everything he said, for good and for bad. He ran because he has these strongly held views, and he's going to push the levers of power, and he's going to interpret and maybe overinterpret his mandate, and then go even beyond that. He has all the things he wants to do to what he thinks fix Washington, and some of them are going to cause problems for the Republicans. And last night they realized it.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I want to ask you a question, which is, the sort of narrative of the past 2 years is that the House, Republicans couldn't run the House. There was the clown cars, people called it. Nancy Mace said that, we lost our majority 6 months ago. This was a year ago. And the idea was that they were going to pay this price at the voting box for their incompetence. And so, not to contradict what I just asked Carl, but maybe there isn't a consequence for not doing a good job in the House. And here they are back again, flipped a couple House seats, improved their majority, it looks like, even after they've sort of done what a lot of people thought was a terrible job for 2 years. So is there no price you pay anymore for performance when it comes to the House of Representatives?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I think these races, again, you could look at this glass. That's a glass half full thing that Republicans managed to not be punished at the ballot box. The glass half empty is, Donald Trump won the popular vote. Republicans won the House generic vote, picked up 4 seats in the Senate, and they barely made any movement in the House at all.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
true.
they should have done better. And so maybe they did pay a price. They could have increased their majority, by a dozen seats instead of 1 or 2. So you can probably argue that either way. And look, you go back to 2022. I mean, the Democrats, by I think every measure that we typically use to look at elections, Democrats should have paid a price in 2022, and they didn't in a lot of those races. And so I think it has to do with the nature of the races themselves. Mm-hmm. And in the House, there's gerrymandering and local issues and candidates and whatnot. So I'm not sure it says much about the House's dysfunction. And I fully expect it to be the same or very close to it. I mean, we've got basically 95% of the people who were responsible for the last couple of years are back in the next Congress. We'll have a few fresh faces, but we're going to have the same leader, going to have the same slim majority. I fully expect it to be more of the same.
Yeah. Well, Carl, I want to talk about a piece that was on the front page of RCP today. It was by Nicole Russell. It's an op-ed from USA Today. So the headline is, "Progressives Insult Americans Because Trump Won. Guess who that helps?" And so she writes in part, leftists' inability for self-reflection, along with their self-righteousness and delusional sense of superior, superiority have been stunning to observe. She quotes a number of progressive media figures, including Steve Colbert, who said to his audience, "So many of us wish this hadn't happened, but that is not for us to decide. This is democracy, and in this democracy, the majority has spoken." And they said they don't care much about democracy. So what do you make of that? And, does she have a point that this isn't really helpful to the Democrats when they attack the voters rather than looking inward at their own party?
It's really quite strange. There was Dick Tuck was a political prankster in California many, many years ago, Democrat. And he ran once for an office in state Senate and lost and quipped after he lost, "The voters have spoken, the bastards." Mo Udall reprised that line when he ran for president, but Mo Udall was kidding. Stephen Colbert, he's a comedian who doesn't understand the joke. When the voters speak and you don't like the outcome, you can call them bastards if you want, but you should be kidding, because if you don't like how it came, you're the one who doesn't like democracy, not the voters. What the voters didn't like was a series of Democratic Party policies. So I'm with you, Andy, and I'm nonplussed that a serious person would even say something like this.
Tom, we got about a minute left here. I know that you have something to say about the media.
Yeah, I mean, that's not enough time for a full-on rant. So that'll just get me warmed up, and then we'll end the show, and I'll be all hot and bothered by this. No, it's somewhere between sort of sour grapes and being sore loser men, if you remember that term. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't get their way at the ballot box, and a majority of the country decided to go in a different direction. I think that's part of the problem with our politics is the way that we've set up these elections to be these existential crises, and they're not that. The Republic is going to survive with Donald Trump at the helm. It would have survived with Kamala Harris at the helm, right? But we impute to our politics all of these terrible, terrible things that simply don't come to pass. And when you don't get your way, but you've set this up as an existential crisis, well, then you have meltdowns and you have people crying on X and all these social. I mean, that's when you get all the bad stuff, because people are putting too much emphasis on politics.
Well, there's a very short rant, a mini rant.
It's a mini rant
from Tom Bevan. Hey, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been talking with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, but don't go away. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Phil Wegmann a little bit more about Matt Gaetz. So we'll be back after this.
This is Real Clear Politics on POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics with Andrew Walworth. You're listening to Sirius XM's POTUS, Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by RCP White House correspondent Phil Wegmann. So, Phil, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
So I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Washington is in a state of shock in the wake of some of Donald Trump's cabinet choices. And of course, the biggest tsunami of them all is now former Congressman and Attorney General in waiting, Matt Gaetz. What are you hearing about the appointment, and what are the chances that he gets through the Senate?
Well, if some of the other picks surprised Washington, D.C., Matt Gaetz enraged them. I profiled the congressman during his freshman year, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and he told me that the mood of the moment was to be abrasive and brash and loud. And that's really what Gaetz has done. Since he came to Congress, he realized that the best way to climb the ladder wasn't to work through the committee system, but instead get in front of the camera. And that has made him beloved by, Trump world, because he has been one of the president's most ardent defenders. And then it's also made a lot of enemies for him among Republicans and Democrats. And so yesterday, when President-elect Trump announced that Gaetz would be his attorney general, there was immediately backlash from Democrats, but Republicans are the ones who can hurt him here. And so this is a nomination really to watch, because there's already bipartisan pushback.
Yeah, so let's break this down a little bit. This is my understanding right now. The GOP will have a 53 to 47 seat majority in the Senate come January. And that means it would take only 4 Republican votes if the Democrats voted as a bloc to reject Gaetz. And so, according to Politico, there are now at least 5 Republican senators who have expressed doubts about Gaetz. Susan Collins, Maine; Lisa Murkowski, Alaska; Tom Tillis, North Carolina; Max Miller, Ohio; Joni Ernst of Iowa. Murkowski saying, I don't think it's a serious nomination. And Miller calling it a reckless pick that has 0 shot of getting through the Senate. Now, this is all based on Politico's reporting. But does that square with what you hear? And I mean, how do they, if they've got 5 already that are on the record or at least on background against him, that sounds like it's going to be a pretty heavy lift.
And we know that Gaetz was girding himself for battle because, as we reported 15 minutes before it was public, he planned to resign. And then Speaker Johnson, during his remarks yesterday, confirmed that. I was speaking with Senator Lindsey Graham not too long ago, and he basically said that whoever Donald Trump wants as his nominees, he's going to get. But it may be that Gaetz is too far. And the reason why is because there's an investigation into Matt Gaetz by the DOJ over whether or not he was involved in underage sex trafficking. The thing to know about this, though, is that Matt Gaetz was never charged, and he certainly wasn't convicted. After the DOJ investigation, though, the House Ethics Committee, they got involved and began their own investigation. The reason why Gaetz' retirement from Congress is significant is the House Ethics Commission, they can't do anything with their report once Gaetz is no longer a member of the House. Now, it's possible for it to leak, but there's no way to actually bring charges. And so that's one thing that I'm watching very carefully, because we heard from Texas Senator John Cornyn that he wants to see what was in that report. What I've heard from my Trump world sources is that Gaetz, by resigning his House seat, he basically was steeling himself for the fight, and that it was sort of a Cortez move, which was, to burn the ships. But, cynically, it also might just be to stop the House Ethics Committee from releasing the goods.
Yeah, and that report was scheduled to come out as soon as Friday, tomorrow, right? So, the timing of this is curious. And as you say, I guess they can't act on the report, but the idea that report would not see the light of day through some sort of leak just doesn't sound like the Washington I know and love.
Absolutely. And this report is going to leak. I've had some interactions with the House Ethics Committee. They are very professional, but let's not forget that is a committee made up of politicians. One thing that I think is really interesting about this episode currently, though, is it distills a lot of things that are currently going on in the Republican ecosystem. You already have a conservative base that is disposed to doubt everything and anything the Department of Justice says. And their argument is, look, they are trying to destroy Gaetz in the same way that they tried to destroy Donald Trump through lawfare. That's the argument. And, there are a lot of sour grapes, most prominently from former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Remember, Gaetz led the charge for the motion to vacate in large part because McCarthy wouldn't dismiss the ethics committee's investigation. But I remember speaking to Gaetz when he was a freshman, and he really rode to prominence this crusade against Rob Mueller. And now, in the end, he may be facing similar circumstances.
Yeah. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm talking to Phil Wegmann. He's our White House correspondent. You cover the White House today. Biden is off to Peru and Brazil. Well, it's a 6-day visit. It's the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. It's the final big international meeting of his presidency. He'll be meeting with the Chinese president there, a couple others. What do you hear about the trip, and what do you make of the importance of it?
This is the capstone for President Biden. Obviously, it comes at the end. He's very proud of the work that he has done in confronting an increasingly aggressive China in the Indo-Pacific, seeing them not as an adversary, but as a competitor. The argument from this White House has always been that they want responsible competition. This, though, might be a good cop scenario when the bad cop is waiting in the wings. Donald Trump has made no bones about how he sees the conflict with China. Just look at some of the picks that he has made. Marco Rubio for state, Mike Waltz for national security advisor, go down the list. So I think this is really Biden's sort of farewell tour. It'll be interesting to see if anything of substance comes out of that meeting with Xi at the end. Yeah,
and let's talk a little bit about the meeting yesterday at the White House, which was extraordinary. This photo op, but then followed by a 2-hour meeting between the president and the incoming president. And I guess just their chiefs of staff were there as well. So very intimate meeting, 2 hours in length. What did they talk about? And, what did Trump walk away from that meeting with, do you think?
So the White House was very tight-lipped about this meeting. It's clear that President Biden and his team, they want to win the transition. And what I mean by that is they want to be gracious and they want to say there might not have been a peaceful transition of power last time. Certainly the transfer happened, but there was that thing that occurred at January 6th at the Capitol. This time, both sides will cooperate and it'll be cordial. And that's what we saw from, the president and the president-elect. They were seen smiling together. President-elect Trump said that politics was a nasty business in the Oval Office, and then the press were sort of hurried out. But thus far, in terms of details, we don't know much of what happened in that meeting. We know that they discussed national security and some of the domestic challenges. But, reporters, we tried so hard to get any detail we could out of White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and she just wasn't budging. At one point, at the end of the briefing, I asked, was there any bipartisan moment? Was there a moment of agreement between these two men? And she wouldn't tell us anything at all. I think that's in the spirit of cooperation, they want to manage this photo op.
Yeah, Trump did say that he focused on Ukraine and the Middle East. I mean, that's not really very surprising. Of course they would be talking about those two things. And the State Department has said that they communicated very strongly that Iran, they felt, was the sort of major threat that the United States faced right now. And that, again, if you're Donald Trump and you've been the subject of an assassination attempt from Iran, that must not be real news to you either. But I do think you're right in that, Biden is trying to sort of kill him with kindness a little bit here and draw that distinction, I guess, between the way he's handling this transition and the way Trump did. Trump didn't even go to his inaugural, which was kind of hadn't happened since 1876 or something like that. So a little crazy.
A little crazy, certainly. But President Biden is sort of a man unburdened by what has been. After the election, he has been nothing but smiles. Certainly, he has tried to console his party. But he's not leaving office with sour grapes. Instead, he seems pretty happy, pretty cheerful. We haven't seen any sniping from the Biden administration about any of Trump's picks. This is the type of bipartisanship that everyone, this era of good feeling that everyone supposedly says that they want.
Yeah, well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM, where we always have good feelings. And I've been talking to Phil Wegmann. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Carl is going to be here. He's going to talk with Tim Shriver, who is the CEO and founder of Unite. And they'll discuss what we can do to improve our public dialogue when it comes to politics. So don't go away. RCP on Sirius XM will return after this.
This is Real Clear Politics with Andrew Walworth on Sirius XM. Real Clear Politics, a neutral, even-handed arbiter of political data. You're listening to POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to the show. I'm talking now with Tim Shriver, who's an old friend of the show, CEO and co-founder of Unite, a group that sounds like it's not a group that you have to guess what its title is. Tim's one of those people like me who thinks maybe we ought to be able to talk to people who maybe didn't vote the way we did and even love them and think they're loyal Americans.
What a crazy thought. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
But Tim, this is a tough election. The Democrats, they said very tough things about Donald Trump, and then he won all these swing states. Trump, of course, said very tough things about them.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea? How are you dealing with this? What are you doing yourself?
Well, it's a good question. I'm trying to keep my center, honestly. I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that almost everyone I meet wants the country to be better, Republican and Democrat. I have still not met anyone who said, when I say we need more dignity in our discourse, I've never met anyone who says, no, we don't. So I think notwithstanding the national dialogue, and we are, I think the thing we can conclude from the election without any great insight is that we're living in a culture that prizes and values and rewards contempt. And we've normalized it. And we've come to assume that it's to be expected, that to treat each other with dehumanizing contempt is okay. And most people don't live their lives that way. So that's my consolation, is in knowing that that's not the world I want to live in. And I don't think most other people want to either, even though I can see that on both sides, and this is the hard message, Carl, this is the hard message. People say, well, contempt won in the election. I said, well, it didn't have an alternative.
That's very good. Okay, but positive signs. Earlier this week, President Biden met with Donald Trump. It seemed cordial. It seemed friendly. It seemed like normal. And I understand there's some politicking and posturing going on there. The Democrats are trying to show the country that they know how to lose gracefully, even though the other guy didn't 4 years ago. I get that, and I'm not naive. And some of the conservatives are saying, well, he called him a Nazi, called him Hitler. Now he's welcoming not Hitler to the White House. But I didn't get either of those messages from it. I thought it felt good. I kind of liked it.
Yeah, I think both, I think both sides used very, very, very hateful language about the other side. I'm sorry to say that's true, because a lot of my progressive friends think, but Vice President Harris, she was hopeful, and she was hopeful in many respects. And I applaud her. And I think in many respects, she gave a great message to the country. But she didn't pause in the attacks on the other side and the dehumanization of the other guy. And what people will say if they're progressive is, well, but he deserved it. And that's exactly what people on the right say about Democrats. They deserve it. Why should I treat them with dignity given the things they do? So this is what happens. You're in a spiral, right? Who hit who first, is a question that almost no one can ever answer in most long-running spirals. So, we need a lift. I've started this podcast called Need a Lift. It's people that are not living in the culture of contempt, who are resisting it. So we need resistors, and we need pockets of people who reinforce each other, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and progressives, who are working together on issues like how do we make our schools safer spaces, working on issues, how do we make our workplaces safer for everyone to be able to disagree, to be able to express their opinions, to be able to bring their best selves to work. How do we make our college campuses safe for people to protest with dignity against each other? I mean, we've got to create subcultures of people who work together and don't necessarily agree on things. That's not the goal. The goal is not to agree. Yeah, the goal is to find a way to disagree without destroying your family or your country.
Well, yeah. When did it become? It used to be an automatic thing. People say, I'll give you. I think you're wrong on this issue. I grant your humanity. I'll grant your motivations, but I really think you're wrong, and I feel very strongly that you're wrong, and the evidence shows I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah. Okay, that's argument, but then we no longer.
That's democracy. That's actually democracy. That's essential.
Right. But now they say, no, your motives are wrong. You hate America, or you're a communist, you're a fascist. Yeah. And don't these people don't really hate America. Don't they know what they're saying is wrong? People who speak this way, or have they just gotten too far over their...
I think when people get into these echo chambers of hate, whether it's in social media or on cable news or in politics itself, you get rewarded. I mean, many politicians, look, if I treat the other side with dignity, I get 5 likes. And if I come after them, I get thousands and thousands of reposts and I get contributions. So we've created this sort of almost evil incentive structure, I dare say, that actually rewards people for being more and more hateful. And I think we just have to catch ourselves We just have to catch ourselves. One woman said to me the other day, what do you want me to do? I hate hateful people. And I was just like,
she wasn't being ironic.
No, she was just like, wait a second. And we had a great conversation afterwards. Like, do you think you can defeat hate by growing the hate within you? I mean, it's almost a logical inconsistency, right? But we have a blind spot, it seems, in politics. We think that the more hateful we are, the more likely we are to achieve caring and compassionate and loving goals. So our means and our ends are really out of sync. And it's, the problem isn't just that our politics, because after all, some people pay attention to politics, some don't. But it's our families. It's 100 million Americans who have ended a relationship in their family or with someone they're close to. It's our workplaces where people feel unsafe. It's our schools where name calling is growing. I mean, that's the place, like I say to people, look, I want to believe passionately in my beliefs, but I don't want to have my beliefs be an excuse for ruining or crushing the spirit of a generation of children, because that's what we're doing. When we scream at
Tim Shriver, CEO and co-founder of Unite, has a podcast, Need a Lift. Tim and I are talking about, I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief for Real Clear Politics, talking now about how we can get the national discourse back on track where we don't hate each other, because it doesn't lead to good governance. Tim, you mentioned something I wanted to ask you about, the echo chambers of cable news. And it seems to me when I first broke in the news business 40 years ago, the media would sort of arbitrate this. And when one party or another went too far, they'd sort of call them out on it. And was this modulating influence on the discourse. But it seems to me that the incentives you're talking about exist in the media as well. And so instead of having a moderating influence, the media just throws fuel on the fire, makes it worse. Yeah. What's the answer to that?
Well, I think, honestly, we've got, I'd say two things. First of all, I think the traditional version of the media, journalists who check facts, run down stories, search for the truth, ask open-ended questions, tell people to the best of their ability what they're seeing. I don't think that's going anywhere. We need that. Country needs that. Human beings need it. We need people who are professional journalists who look for the truth and try to report it to the best of their ability. It doesn't mean they're always going to get the story right. We all know that doesn't happen. But we do know there's a profession here. It's just like in medicine. We need doctors. We need people who are good at holistic medicine and good at all kinds of things. But we also need doctors. We need journalists. The traditional journalism may not be in fashion right now, but hold on, gang. We're coming back to you. Sooner or later, we're coming back to you. And I think it's important. You see a lot of your colleagues, Carl, who are holding ground in electronic spaces, but are getting people to come back and listen to real professional journalism. I think that's number one. Number two, some of it's on the consumer. We got to create a movement that, like there have been boycotts in the past, like there's a bad product, don't buy X or don't buy Y or don't go to this store or that restaurant because they're doing something we don't agree with. We've got to police ourselves. I say to people, do not click on a story when the headline is full of hate. Why? Because you're paying the person who is promoting hate. So we got to get some discipline as consumers of the news. And you may say that's crazy. That's never going to happen. People are going to click on things forever. I don't know. I'm not so skeptical about people. We got to educate kids about how to use social media and how not to.
Well, Matt Taibbi wrote a book. He called it Hate Incorporated, and it was about cable television, but the media. And I remember when the book came out, I thought it was too strong. I thought, well, hate's not what they're selling. They're really selling conflict. But turns out he was right. He was an early guy who noticed
he was early
this.
on it. He did. And Kara Swisher has written on it more recently. Devotional anger is the word they use. Animosity. They're selling a version of reality that makes you want to hate other people. And that keeps you coming back.
All right. So when are you going to write a book that's the antidote to this that we can promote on our show?
I'm working on that. It's going to take a little bit, but it's not going to be a long book, but it's going to tell the Matt Taibbi version of the story as part of the diagnosis of what's gone wrong. But it's also going to hopefully point people to practical ways we can use things like the Dignity Index to raise our game.
Well, that's a good note to end on. You've been listening to Tim Shriver, CEO and co-founder of Unite. Where do they find your podcast? Need a Lift, Tim?
Need a Lift is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can find that. And the Dignity Index and the work we're doing with politicians and businesses and so on is at dignityindex.us. Everything we have is .us.
Well, that's great. You've given us a lift today. And
thanks, Carl.
We'll be back tomorrow, same time, 3 p.m. in California, 6 p.m. in the East. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics, and you've been listening to my conversation with Tim Shriver, CEO and co-founder of Unite. Have a good day.
The
Politics
of
the
United States.
This is POTUS on SiriusXM Channel 124.